Apologies for the oversight. Here is the corrected translation. The city of Edinburgh, Scotland, appears like a classic painting in the grey mist of rain. The cobblestone streets reflect the faint light from vintage-style lampposts, creating a scene that is both romantic and somber. Edinburgh Castle stands proudly atop Castle Rock, like a guardian of history, immovable amidst the passage of time and the hustle of the modern world. It was an autumn evening in 2023 when a major storm swept through the city. Cold winds scattered the last golden leaves of the season, and rain poured down as if trying to erase every trace of human presence. Amid this storm, two people with different stories accidentally met at Rosewood Manor, an old hotel nestled on the outskirts of the city. A sleek, black Bentley driven by Alexander Reed glided slowly along the waterlogged roads outside Edinburgh. The windshield wipers worked tirelessly, yet Alexander's view remained obscured by the thick curtain of rain. He felt pressure closing in from all sides. Over the past weeks, his name had been splashed across financial newspapers, linked to a scandal involving the company he led. As a young and ambitious CEO, Alexander had poured his heart and soul into building his career, but now he couldn't help but question, was it all worth it? Lost in thought, a light from a roadside building caught his attention. A faint sign emerged through the rain. Rosewood Manor. With no other options, Alexander turned in and parked on the gravel driveway in front of the hotel. He stepped out, the cold rain immediately seeping through his tailored suit, but he didn't care. All he wanted was a place to take refuge. The lobby of Rosewood Manor exuded warmth, a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. A large fireplace roared with flames, the flickering light dancing across the dark wooden walls. A soft golden glow emanated from a vintage chandelier, creating a serene and nostalgic atmosphere. Velvet green armchairs were arranged near the fireplace, inviting guests to relax and read. Alexander walked in, water dripping from his soaked hair and coat. He intended to head straight to the reception desk, but was drawn to a woman sitting by a large window. She wore a thick gray sweater, her brown hair falling naturally over her shoulders. Before her was a large canvas, and her skilled hands moved the brush with slow yet deliberate strokes. Sophia Carter, an American artist, looked up at the sound of unfamiliar footsteps. She had been staying here for nearly a week, soaking in the tranquility of Edinburgh while seeking inspiration for her new art collection. The man who had just entered carried an entirely different energy. He looked as though he was shouldering the weight of the world, yet his piercing blue eyes held a sadness that was difficult to name. She offered a small smile as if to dispel the heavy aura he carried. "Escaping the storm, are we?" she said, her voice light but tinged with humor. Alexander turned, surprised by the stranger's friendliness. "Yes, and I think I've just found the safest place in Edinburgh," he replied dryly but with sincerity. They began with casual small talk, but within minutes, their conversation grew deeper. Sophia asked, "Have you ever thought that the things we chase are just to please others?" Alexander paused, looking deeply into her eyes. It was a question he had never dared to ask himself. "I think sometimes I chase it so hard that I forget myself," he admitted, his voice almost breaking. Sophia nodded, her eyes reflecting understanding. "I used to feel that way," she said, "but then I realized, if I don't live authentically, I'll never find joy or meaning in what I do." In the dim light of the fireplace and the steady sound of rain outside the window, Alexander felt, for the first time in weeks, that he could let his shoulders relax and his mind find peace. Welcome to today's story. Let us know which city you're tuning in from by leaving a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to never miss out on meaningful videos. The sound of raindrops pattering against the glass roof of Rosewood Manor signaled a new day. The storm had not completely subsided, but it had softened into a gentle drizzle, mingling with the mist that shrouded the hotel grounds. The dim autumn morning light rendered everything like an ink painting, exuding a serene yet somber tranquility. Alexander sat by the large window in the dining room, a cup of hot coffee in hand. His eyes absent-mindedly gazed outside, where raindrops trickled down vibrant red maple leaves. His mind lingered on last night's conversation with Sophia. Her question had not only made him think, but had also stirred a deep sense of unease, as if she had seen through the facade he had been trying so hard to maintain. Sophia entered the room, her brown hair loosely tied back. She wore a green coat, and her black rubber boots were speckled with rain. The gentle smile on her face seemed to brighten the entire space. She approached his table without hesitation and asked, "Would you like to take a walk around the garden? It's more beautiful in the rain than you'd think." Alexander was momentarily taken aback. He hadn't expected someone he barely knew to speak to him so naturally. After a brief hesitation, he nodded. "I suppose I could use some fresh air, even if it smells like rain." They stepped into the back garden of the hotel. It was an old, meticulously tended garden with cobblestone paths, lush greenery, and rose bushes glistening with dew. In the soft rain, the garden exuded an enchanting beauty, as if it had come straight out of a fairy tale. "This is where I often come to paint," Sophia said, gesturing toward a corner of the garden where a wooden bench sat beneath a maple tree. "I don't know why, but rain always makes everything feel more alive. The colors, the light, even the emotions." Alexander gave a rare smile, a fleeting moment of relaxation. "It's so different from my world. I've never thought of rain as anything but an inconvenience." Sophia turned to look at him. "Maybe you're just seeing it from the wrong perspective. Sometimes the smallest things hold the greatest power. That's why I paint." As they strolled along the gravel path, Sophia shared her story. Born into a wealthy family in New York, she had been expected to take over her parents' business. But from a young age, she had loved art. Her passion eventually led to conflict with her family, especially when she decided to drop out of business school to pursue a career as a painter. "My parents thought art was just a hobby, not a career," she said, her tone calm but tinged with bitterness. "They told me no one makes a living off dreams. But I didn't care. I couldn't give up painting. It's the only way I feel truly alive." Alexander listened silently, her words like quiet waves lapping at his consciousness. He began to notice the difference between them. Sophia had the courage to give up everything to live authentically, while he had spent his life chasing the expectations of others. His family, friends, the board of directors. He had never once asked himself what he truly wanted. The conflict within Alexander began to grow. When Sophia paused in front of a bush of white daisies, bending down to gently touch the dew-covered petals, Alexander broke the silence as if to shatter the tension in the air. "Aren't you afraid of going against everyone's expectations?" Sophia straightened up and looked him directly in the eye. "Of course I'm afraid, but I'm even more afraid of living a life that doesn't belong to me. What about you, Alexander? What scares you the most?" Alexander didn't answer immediately. He looked at Sophia, sensing the sincerity in her gaze, then turned to the garden before them. In that moment, he realized that his greatest fear wasn't failure or losing others' respect. It was losing himself. They continued walking in silence, the only sounds being the gentle rain and their footsteps on the gravel path. But for Alexander, everything had changed. Sophia wasn't just an artist with intriguing stories. She was the first person who made him confront the emotions he had long buried. The rain continued to drizzle outside Rosewood Manor that afternoon, draping the hotel grounds in a somber gray. Sophia sat in the grand lobby, a warm cup of tea in her hands, her eyes skimming over the unfinished sketches before her. Yet her mind was not truly there. She recalled the morning conversation with Alexander, the way he avoided deep questions about himself, and the worries etched so clearly on his face. When Alexander appeared at the entrance to the lobby, his appearance was tidy, but his gait and eyes betrayed the heaviness he was trying to conceal. He carried a laptop, as if he had just finished working, but upon noticing Sophia, he paused, seemingly deliberating something. After a few seconds of hesitation, he walked over. "Can you help me with something?" Alexander asked, his voice deep and weary. "What is it?" Sophia responded, raising an eyebrow, surprised by his directness. "I need a quiet place to think. Perhaps you know of somewhere suitable in the grounds." Sophia gave a slight smile. "I know just the place. Follow me." Sophia led Alexander to a secluded corner of the hotel grounds, where a small greenhouse was hidden amidst dense shrubs. The glass panes, streaked with raindrops, created a private and tranquil atmosphere. Inside, the greenhouse was adorned with lush ferns and an old wooden table and chairs. Sophia gestured to a chair. "You can sit here." Alexander placed his laptop on the table. But instead of opening it, he looked at Sophia and said, "It's strange. I don't usually talk about personal matters with others, but with you, I feel like I can." Sophia remained silent, waiting for him to continue. After a long pause, Alexander sighed, his gaze distant as he looked through the veil of rain. "My company," he began, his voice heavy, "is in chaos. We've just been caught in a major scandal. One branch invested in a dubious real estate project. Hundreds of employees lost their jobs when the project failed. Although I wasn't directly involved in that project, the responsibility ultimately falls on me. I'm the CEO, and I have to bear the consequences." Sophia looked at him, saying nothing, just listening. "My family, the board, the media, they're all pressing down on me. They expect me to fix everything, but I don't know how. I feel like I'm caught in a storm with no way out." Sophia set her tea down and looked directly at Alexander. "Have you ever thought that sometimes to get out of a storm, you need to stand still and let it pass instead of trying to fight it?" Alexander frowned, clearly not understanding her point. "What I mean," she continued, "is that sometimes you have to accept that you can't control everything. Fixing mistakes is important, but you'll never find peace if you keep trying to live in a world that doesn't truly belong to you." Alexander mulled over her words. "Are you saying I should give up everything?" he asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. "Not give up," Sophia replied. "Start over, break everything down and rebuild it in a way you believe is right. But first, you have to be honest with yourself." Alexander fell silent, his eyes dropping to his tightly clasped hands. He wasn't sure what to do with Sophia's advice, but for the first time, he felt a faint glimmer of clarity in the foggy chaos of his mind. Sophia wasn't just challenging him to rethink everything he was trying so hard to protect. She was forcing him to question what he truly wanted in life. Sophia smiled gently, lightly touching his arm. "You're not alone in this, Alexander. Whatever you decide, remember that no one lives without making mistakes. What matters is how we rise from them." Alexander lifted his head and, for the first time, smiled back at her. It wasn't a smug or guarded smile, but a genuine one, as if he had found a missing piece to the puzzle of his life. That evening, Rosewood Manor was bathed in warm light. The hotel's grand lobby was adorned with flickering candles and small bouquets placed on antique wooden tables. A corner of the room had been cleared to make a stage for a small concert, where a violinist and a pianist were preparing to perform. The guests, mostly those staying to escape the storm, gathered in small groups, sipping wine and chatting softly. Sophia entered the room, her slender figure draped in a cream-colored knitted dress. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for Alexander, someone she thought unlikely to attend an event like this. But then she saw him, standing in the far corner, wearing a gray blazer. His composed demeanor couldn't hide the searching look in his eyes. She approached him with a gentle smile. "You made it," she said, her voice soft but carrying a hint of joy. Alexander shrugged, but a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "I thought I could use a change of pace." The concert began, the poignant notes of the violin intertwining with the delicate keys of the piano, filling the space with a cascade of emotions. The music blended seamlessly with the sound of raindrops against the windows, creating an atmosphere of unparalleled romance. Sophia and Alexander sat beside each other, saying nothing, yet a sense of extraordinary calm enveloped them both. Alexander glanced at Sophia, her face softly illuminated by the nearby candlelight. Her eyes seemed lost in the melodies, her expression serene. "It's strange," Alexander murmured after a long silence. "I've never felt this relaxed, even while doing nothing at all." Sophia tilted her head, her smile softening further. "That's the power of music, and sometimes silence is the best way to connect." After the performance, the guests began to disperse, but Sophia led Alexander to a wooden table where she had set out a small watercolor kit and some drawing paper. Alexander looked at her in surprise. "We're going to paint?" he asked, half amused. "Yes," Sophia replied with a playful glint in her eyes. "But not just anything. I want us to paint how we perceive each other." Alexander chuckled lightly, his gaze flickering with curiosity. "You really want to know what I think of you?" "Absolutely," Sophia said, placing a sheet of paper before him. "But don't take it too seriously. Just paint with your feelings." It doesn't have to be accurate. They began painting in silence, the only sounds being the brushes gliding across the paper and the soft rhythm of the rain outside. Alexander, not naturally skilled at painting, focused intently, trying to express his feelings through color and form. Sophia, in contrast, painted with swift, confident strokes, as if pouring her soul onto the paper. When they finished, Sophia smiled and asked, "Will you show me yours first?" Alexander pushed his paper toward her. The painting depicted a woman standing in the midst of a stormy night, surrounded by golden beams of light, radiant like the sun breaking through the clouds. Rain fell around her, but her light remained unyielding, growing stronger despite the storm. Sophia stared at the painting, her voice trembling slightly. "You think I'm the light?" "You are the light in my stormy night," Alexander said, his voice deep and earnest. "You've made me realize that even in the darkest moments, there's something to hold on to." Sophia remained silent, her eyes filled with complex emotions. After a moment, she slid her own painting toward Alexander. In her depiction, Alexander appeared as a strong man with broad shoulders and resolute eyes. Yet invisible strings coiled around him, binding his body and holding him back from moving forward. "This is how I see you," Sophia said softly. "You're strong, determined, but you're trapped by the strings you've created for yourself." Alexander stared at the painting, feeling as though she had stripped away all the layers he had tried to hide behind. But instead of resisting, he gave a bittersweet smile. "You truly see right through me." "And you can break those strings," Sophia said, her gaze unwavering, "if you want to." In the flickering candlelight, Alexander and Sophia looked at each other, no more words needed. Both understood that, despite the short time they had known each other, they had shared moments of honesty that even years couldn't forge. That night, as they left the hotel lobby, the rain continued to fall, but it no longer felt cold. Each carried the other's painting, a reminder of the connection they had discovered. The next morning, faint sunlight filtered through the trees, signaling that the storm had completely passed. The air around Rosewood Manor was still, as if the place itself was waiting for something new to unfold. Alexander woke up feeling a heavy weight on his chest, but within him was a clarity he had never experienced before. Alexander sat in the grand lobby of the hotel, his phone placed in front of him. He had spent the entire morning drafting a speech he planned to deliver to the board of directors at the emergency meeting the next day. It was a speech he knew would change everything, not just for the company, but for himself as well. Sophia entered, holding a cup of hot tea. She looked at Alexander, her eyes questioning. "Are you okay?" Alexander looked up, his eyes reflecting a determination Sophia hadn't seen before. "I think I finally know what I need to do. I can't keep running anymore. I'm going to face the board, admit the mistakes, and commit to changing how the company operates." Sophia pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "That's a big decision," she said, her voice gentle yet encouraging. "But I believe you can do it." Alexander smiled faintly, a hint of relief crossing his face. "You were right. I can't find peace if I keep living in a world that doesn't feel like my own. I need to do this, not for my family or the board, but for myself, so that I can look in the mirror without feeling ashamed." Sophia listened quietly, then smiled. "I've made a decision of my own," she said. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "What decision?" "I'm going back to the US, Sophia replied. "I've completed my collection of paintings inspired by Scotland. It's time to bring them to the world, starting with a small gallery in New York. I've dreamed about this for so long, and now I feel ready." Alexander fell silent, a trace of sadness flickering in his eyes. But he nodded, understanding that this was what Sophia needed to do. "That's an amazing step," he said sincerely. "You have a special talent, Sophia. I'm certain people will see that." Sophia smiled softly. "Thank you, Alexander. You have no idea how much that means to me." That evening, as soft yellow lights illuminated the hotel's garden, Alexander and Sophia took one last walk together. They strolled slowly along the gravel paths, letting the crimson maple leaves drift gently around them. "Do you know what surprises me?" Sophia suddenly asked. "What?" Alexander turned to her. "You," she said, her voice full of emotion. "When we met, I thought you were just a man overwhelmed by work. But in truth, you're someone with so much depth and courage. I think even you don't realize it." Alexander smiled, tilting his head slightly as he looked at her. "Maybe you're right, but maybe I've only realized it because of you. Sophia, you've helped me rediscover who I truly am." Sophia stopped walking, her gaze meeting his. "I'm glad I could help you." Alexander remained silent for a moment, then spoke, his voice low but sincere. "I don't want to lose touch with you, Sophia. You're the only person who makes me feel like I can be better." Sophia chuckled softly. "We won't lose touch, Alexander. I promise." The next day, Sophia stood in the hotel lobby, ready to leave for the U.S. Alexander stood beside her, his eyes clearly showing his reluctance to say goodbye. He wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. "You'll be fine, Alexander," Sophia said as if reading his thoughts, "and I hope you'll find what you truly want in life." Alexander nodded and stepped forward to embrace her one last time. "Thank you, Sophia, for everything." She smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Goodbye, Alexander. Keep your promise." Sophia left, but what she had left behind in Alexander was an awakening. She was not just a friend, but someone who had opened a new door in his life. As her car disappeared from view, Alexander returned to the hotel, preparing for his journey back to London. A new chapter in his life had begun. The morning in London unfolded like a massive machine in constant motion. Alexander stood before the towering glass building, the company's headquarters. From there, he could see the hurried flow of people below, each step a reminder of the weight of responsibility he carried. Today was the day he would face the board of directors, present his reform plan, and take accountability for the scandal. Alexander could feel the pressure pressing down on his shoulders, but this time, he wasn't afraid. He had decided to live authentically, even if it meant risking everything. The conference room on the 25th floor was designed with minimalist elegance, featuring a long boardroom table and high-end leather chairs. The board members, faces marked by authority, experience, and calculation, sat on either side of the table, their eyes fixed on Alexander as he entered the room. "Shall we begin?" James Whitaker, the chairman of the board, said in a deep, commanding voice. He had been by Alexander's father's side during the company's early days and was one of the most vocal critics of Alexander's handling of the recent scandal. Alexander nodded, carrying a stack of documents as he stepped forward. But instead of opening them, he looked up, meeting the gaze of each member in the room. "First, I want to take responsibility for the current state of the company," Alexander began, his voice steady. "The recent scandal has not only damaged our reputation, but also cost many employees their jobs and trust, and I am ultimately accountable for that." The room fell silent. A few members appeared surprised by his candor. James, however, remained impassive, waiting for what would come next. "However," Alexander continued, "instead of placing blame or avoiding the issue, I want to propose a comprehensive reform plan, not just to address the fallout, but to rebuild our company culture, prioritizing transparency and social responsibility. This plan isn't just about restoring our reputation," he concluded, "but about ensuring we never repeat the mistakes of the past. I'm ready to face any consequences, but I hope you'll stand with me to make this company something we can all be proud of." The room was silent for several seconds. James Whitaker was the first to speak. "Alexander," he said, his tone stern, "this is a bold plan, but it's also fraught with risk. Are you certain you're capable of executing it?" Alexander met James's gaze without blinking. "I can't guarantee success, but I am certain this is the right thing to do, and I'm willing to risk everything to make it happen." Some board members began to exchange opinions, voicing support or skepticism. Surprisingly, Margaret Green, one of the most senior members known for her neutral stance, spoke up in favor. "We've been stuck in old ways for far too long," she said. "Perhaps it's time for a change. I support Alexander's plan." Gradually, voices of agreement started to ripple through the room. Even James Whitaker, though still cautious, eventually nodded. "I'll be watching your progress closely," he said. "Let's hope you don't disappoint us." When the meeting concluded, Alexander stepped out of the boardroom feeling a sense of relief. This was only the first step in a long journey, but he felt proud for confronting the truth and choosing the right path. As he exited the building, he looked up at the clear London sky after the rain. Sophia's words echoed in his mind. Sometimes you have to break everything to rebuild it. And now he knew he had begun rebuilding, not just the company, but himself. New York, 1 year later. The city that never sleeps was now adorned with shimmering lights from thousands of skyscrapers. In a quiet corner of Manhattan, Sophia Carter's gallery, Lumina, was preparing for its opening night. This was her first exhibition after years of dedication, with the theme, Light in the Storm. Sophia, dressed in a pearl satin gown, stood in the midst of the impressive gallery space. Her paintings narrated stories of wounded souls, life's storms, and the light that emerges when they rediscover themselves. She watched everything with a mix of pride and nervousness, though a small corner of her heart remained tinged with sadness. Alexander, the man who had inspired her to create this collection, had not been in touch for the past year. Sophia reassured herself that she was fine, but deep down she still hoped to see him again. The exhibition began, and guests marveled at Sophia's work one by one. The soft golden light from the spotlights reflected off the paintings, making everything seem almost alive. Sophia engaged in conversations with each guest, but her mind kept drifting back to memories of Edinburgh. As the evening reached its peak, a man in a black suit entered, Alexander. He appeared calm, his eyes fixed on Sophia from the moment he saw her. Sophia froze when she noticed him, her heart racing. She hadn't expected him to come. They walked toward each other, their eyes communicating everything without needing words. "You're here," Sophia whispered, a faint smile playing on her lips. Alexander nodded, his eyes glowing in the light. "I've always wanted to be here." As the guests admired the artwork, the lights dimmed, then focused on a painting covered by a red cloth in the center of the gallery. Sophia turned, surprised to see Alexander stepping onto the platform, microphone in hand. "Thank you all for coming tonight to admire Sophia's incredible work," he began, his deep voice resonating in the room. "But there is one painting I'd like to introduce personally, because it's not just a piece of art, it's the beginning of everything." Alexander pulled away the red cloth, revealing the first painting they had created together at Rosewood Manor. It was Alexander's painting, Sophia as a beacon of light amidst a storm, displayed on an antique easel and encircled by a golden spotlight. Sophia stood frozen, unable to believe her eyes. Alexander turned to look at her, his gaze filled with emotion. "Sophia, you are the light in my storm. You helped me find myself when I was most lost. I don't want to spend another day without you by my side." He stepped down from the platform, kneeling before her and producing a small box. Inside was a simple yet elegant ring, with a teardrop-shaped diamond sparkling like the light in the painting. "Please," Alexander said, his voice trembling slightly, "let me walk this journey with you." Tears streamed down Sophia's cheeks. Without a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Yes, Alexander, I will." Applause and cheers erupted from the guests in the gallery. Alexander stood, pulling Sophia into a tight embrace. In that moment, both knew they had found what they had been searching for, a place where they truly belonged. The evening ended in a moment as magical as a fairy tale. Amid the soft golden glow, Alexander and Sophia danced among the paintings that told their story. Gentle music played, and their eyes never left each other. Their painting, a symbol of their first connection, was no longer just a piece of art. It was a reminder of the power of love and empathy. Together, they had weathered their individual storms to find light not only in life, but in each other's hearts. A year later, in a picturesque garden on the outskirts of Edinburgh, where the brilliant autumn sunlight bathed fields of lavender, Alexander and Sophia celebrated their wedding. Sophia appeared in an elegant white gown, her eyes glowing with happiness, while Alexander stood at the altar, his gaze never leaving her. They held hands and exchanged vows. "You are the light in my storm. I promise to love you forever, through the sunny days and the stormy ones. And you are the one who made me believe that love can change everything. I promise to stand by you, always." As they exchanged rings, applause echoed throughout the garden. The reception took place in a space filled with glimmering golden lights. During their first dance, Alexander leaned down and whispered, "You've made me the best version of myself." "Thank you." Sophia smiled, her eyes shining brightly. "And you are the reason I continue to believe in miracles." Under a starlit sky, They began their new journey, together forever. This story teaches that true love is not just an emotion, but also a driving force that helps us overcome difficulties and rediscover ourselves. Alexander and Sophia demonstrated courage in facing their mistakes, living authentically, and starting anew. Art and empathy connected them, helping both realize that happiness lies not in material success, but in staying true to one's heart. Pure love is the power that transforms and creates a more meaningful life. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Let us know your thoughts on this story in the comments below. What type of stories would you like to hear next? Don't forget to like, share this story, and subscribe to our channel for more.